Hey, everybody. It is great to see you. My name is Jerry Herships. I am the pastor at Applewood Valley United Methodist Church in Golden, Colorado, just about 20 minutes outside of Denver. I don't think I mentioned this to anybody, but about 2 or 3 weeks ago, they do a thing every year in Golden called Goldens in Golden. And golden retrievers from all over the country come to town, and it is absolute chaos, but so much fun. Oh my God, so many adorable Goldens. I'm allergic to dogs, but it was outdoors. I made it through, but such fun. Anyway, that was a side note. I've got lots to talk about. We are 1 week away from Lent. I'm doing a Lenten series. I'll tell you more about that in just a minute. But next week, I will not be here. I'm going to be out of town doing some other Jesus-y kind of work. So I'll be doing that. So you get a week off from me next week. But let's have some God talk today. So this will be the first, really, of my whole Lenten series. You'll see what I mean in a second. So here we go. So first, I want to read you the scripture. It's from Isaiah. It's first chapter of Isaiah, Isaiah 1, only 2 verses, 16 and 17. The name of the sermon is called Justice. It's not just for us. Get it? See what I did? Anyway. So here's Isaiah. Wash yourselves. Make yourselves clean. Remove the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Rescue the oppressed. Plead for mercy. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So we are less than 1 week away from Lent, or as I like to call it, 40 dry days till the resurrection. So for the last 2 years, and this will be my third year, I have given up booze during Lent. It is just tough enough that I notice it, and not so tough that it's a hardship. Now, I've not always given something up during Lent. Honestly, sometimes I think it can be kind of silly, actually. I do like the idea of picking something up for Lent, a daily prayer practice, daily acts of kindness, daily acts of service. Those things I think Jesus would approve. Giving up chocolate, not so much. But I was telling someone earlier this week that even though I'm doing a sermon series now, I never really got sermon series. My process is a lot closer than being able to work that many weeks out. Usually I try to look at my own life and see where I'm struggling, what things keep popping up in my week over and over and over again, good or bad. And am I seeing a pattern? That's how I usually do it. Now, having said that, I think series can be useful. So I'm starting this Lenten series 1 week early, because like I said, I'm not going to be here next week, because I have 6 themes that I want to talk about. And honestly, I just didn't have the heart to get rid of any of them. So we'll do one this week, take next week off, and then I'll do the rest of them. I'm going to call it the practices that make us better people. And bonus, more like Jesus. And I think this works because I believe that when we are our best selves, we are as close to Jesus as we can be. I think we've moved into a time now in our world where it is harder and harder to be like Jesus. It is harder and harder to be a Christian. We are in a time when not only is it hard to be like Jesus, people actually mock you when you're like Jesus and make fun of it. People start to call you things like weak. And if that's the case, so be it. Follow these practices anyway. As I've said many times, living like Jesus is simple. It's just not easy. And do know, when we perform some of these practices, it might come at a cost. This past week, I had someone take the time to write an email to my bishop, our bishop, for this whole 5-state region. This person said, I spew hate and am in fact, and I quote, obsessed with hate. Now, this really saddens me. This person doesn't even know me. They don't attend my church. They're not regulars. They're not members of the church. And it just makes me sad, because if they took the time to really get to know me, I am certain they would find all kinds of legit reasons not to like me. And while their words did sadden me, it won't stop me from speaking truth to power when I see cruel words and actions that I feel are the antithesis of the gospel and the exact opposite of the words and actions of Jesus. Now, I will also, as I mentioned in previous sermons, pray for them. Because, folks, the worst thing we can do is demonize someone. Remember the words of singer-songwriter Toby Mac, you will never look into the eyes of someone that God doesn't love. I know sometimes that can seem impossible, but it's true. Now, I want to be clear. None of the practices I'm going to suggest that we practice over Lent are cool. None of them are in, but I think they should be. Personally, I think they're both dope and fire. See what I did there? Talking like the kids. I want to stay up to date, but I don't want my riz to overshadow my point. But okay, I'll stop. But in 7 weeks, we will be in Holy Week. And if you work on these practices between now and then, I believe you will be in a better place to experience what that week will bring. So let's begin with what many would say is one of the central principles of Jesus' time on earth: justice. We see in our passage today that it's at the very beginning of Isaiah. Isaiah is the 23rd book of the Bible. It was written somewhere between 740 and 700 BC. Now, the traditional view is that Isaiah wrote the whole thing, but modern scholarship doesn't buy that and believes that it had many authors, actually written over a long period of time. Now, right from the very first chapter, we hear Isaiah pleading with the people to change their ways, hence the make yourself clean and to stop doing evil. Now, it's important to note that it isn't enough to just stop doing evil, but to also learn to do good. And what does learning to do good look like? Isaiah breaks it down into 4 things: seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, and plead for the widow. Justice includes rescuing, defending, and pleading for the weakest in society. Those with no power, those with no agency, those who have no one to turn to. In Jesus' day, this would be the orphan and the widow for sure, as well as the foreigner and the sick and the poor. In the Bible, justice is a concept that at its center is really about relationships. We often want to make it really complicated, but it doesn't have to be. It simply means treating all people with dignity and with fairness. That's all. It's about living a life that is in right relationship with God as we understand God to be. It's about being in right relationship with each other. And this is one that we're hearing more and more about now that we didn't always. Being in right relationship with the natural world. See, biblical justice can be seen when we perform acts of love and compassion for those people who are on the margins and who are the vulnerable of society, which we'll look at even closer over Lent in the coming weeks. It can be seen in marches and protests that work to change social structures that support injustice. Biblical justice is not just making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for the homeless, but also asking, why are there so many homeless? And what systems are in place that prevent people from getting housed? Justice in the Bible often aligns with the laws of the land, but not always so. We saw this during the suffrage movement. One thing that's often forgot is that many times, in fact, I'd go so far as to say most times, that these things don't happen overnight. The women's suffrage movement in the United States lasted 72 years, from the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848 to the ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1920. We see justice and law not squaring up again during slavery. In the United States, slavery lasted 246 years. From 1619, when the first enslaved Africans arrived in the American colonies, until 1865, when the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in all states, and Juneteenth commemorates the day in 1865 when the slaves who were in Galveston, Texas, learned that they were free. Again, it's not always overnight. Martin Luther King Jr. famously said in his letter from Birmingham jail, one has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. Now, having said that, I think it's inaccurate to believe that these grand moments in history are the only times that we can act justly and do justice. We can each do justice in small actions and words. Author and Trappist monk Thomas Merton addressed this in a letter that he wrote in 1966, replying to Jim Forrest. Jim Forrest was a young activist at the time who went on to become the founder of the Catholic Peace Fellowship. It was later on published in the Catholic Worker. In the letter, Merton wrote these words: "Do not depend on the hope of results. When you're doing this sort of work, you may have to face the fact that your work will be apparently worthless and achieve no result at all, if not results opposite of what you expect. As you get used to the idea, you start more and more to concentrate not on the result, but on the value, the rightness, the truth of the work itself. And there too, a great deal has to be gone through as gradually you struggle less and less for an idea and more for specific people." He closes by saying, "The range tends to narrow down, but it gets more real. In the end, it is the reality of personal relationships that save everything." So once again, we are right back to relationships. Peter Rollins is somebody that I've quoted and mentioned in the past. He's probably one of my favorite theologians, and it's a huge bonus that he's from Belfast, Northern Ireland, where my grandmother's from. In one of his talks, he mentions that he was taking all these questions. It was like a 5-hour session in this huge hall. And finally, someone from the audience, one of the audience members, finally asked the question, said, "Pete, with all this theology, but you don't say much about the resurrection. Do you deny the resurrection?" And Pete in his brogue says, "I thought, it's time to fess up. Yes, of course I do. Anyone that knows me knows I deny the resurrection." And then he goes on to say, "Every time I do not serve my neighbor, every time I walk away from people who are poor, every time I deny the resurrection, every time I participate in an unjust system. And I affirm the resurrection every now and again when I stand up for those who have had forced to their knees. I affirm the resurrection when I cry out for those people who have had their tongues torn out, when I weep for people who have no more tears to shed." That's what we're trying to do. Substantive change. Thank you. Substantive change. Substantive change is another name for justice. As we move into Lent, I hope we keep our eyes open for moments when we can make substantive change for our cities, for our country, for ourselves, and for God. This Lenten season, I want to do my best to deny the resurrection less and less. And I hope you do too. Let it be so. Amen. So, sorry, got a little verklempt right there in the middle. Didn't see that coming. Boy, folks, it is a tough time right now in our country to be a follower of Jesus. It's even hard to even say the word Christian, because even that means so many different things to so many different people, and sometimes I don't want to be lumped in, with those people. But I do want to be lumped in with the people that are trying to follow Jesus, that are trying to live by his practices and the things that he believed in, and the things that he valued. And so those are the things that we're going to be covering over the next few weeks during Lent as we make our way to Good Friday and eventually Easter, is what are those things that Jesus valued, and how can we start to value them more and more and more. I look forward to being on that journey with all of you. Until then, please, you know the marching orders. Go out and put more love in the world. And until I see you next time, take care. Bye-bye. We'll see you soon.